The restaurant buzzed with the quiet hum of conversation. Martha glanced around, noting the familiar faces of couples who frequented the place as much as she and Harry did. Their favorite spot by the window offered a view of the city lights, shimmering in the night. But tonight, Martha found herself distracted. Harry reached for the bottle of wine between them, pouring more into their glasses. "You know, I was thinking about our first date here," he said, his voice steady as he swirled the wine in his glass. "Do you remember it?" Martha nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. You were so nervous you knocked over the breadbasket." Harry laughed, the sound deep and genuine. "And you pretended not to notice, which only made me more nervous." Martha chuckled, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about Curtis, about the last time they met, how he had kissed her in that hidden corner of the park, how his hands felt on her skin. The memory sent a jolt of excitement through her, quickly followed by a wave of guilt. She squeezed Harry's hand, trying to stay present, but her thoughts kept drifting. 20 years, Harry repeated, his eyes fixed on her. "It's hard to believe we've made it this far." "It is," Martha agreed, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. She had once loved Harry with everything she had, but things had changed. She had changed. Harry leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I've been planning something special for us tomorrow." Martha tilted her head, trying to focus on him. "Oh, what's the occasion?" Harry grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "You'll see. Just be ready by noon." She arched an eyebrow. "No hints? Nothing at all?" "Not a chance," Harry said, shaking his head. "You'll just have to trust me." Martha smiled, but inside, she felt uneasy. She wanted to feel the thrill of his words, the anticipation of whatever surprise he had in store. But all she could think about was how she could fit in a quick meeting with Curtis before noon. "All right," she said, trying to match his enthusiasm. "I'm looking forward to it." Harry's smile widened. "Good. It'll be a day to remember, I promise." As they finished their meal, the conversation flowed easily, filled with reminiscing about their past. Harry recounted stories from their early years together, how they'd struggled through their first apartment, the vacations they'd saved up for, and the countless little moments that had defined their life together. Martha listened, nodding and laughing at the right moments, but her heart wasn't in it. She glanced at the time on her phone, calculating how long it would take her to get to Curtis's apartment the next morning and still make it back in time for whatever Harry had planned. A part of her knew she should cancel, spend the day with Harry, and try to recapture what they once had. But the pull towards Curtis was too strong, too intoxicating to resist. When the waiter brought the check, Harry insisted on paying, as always. "My treat," he said with a wink. "Consider it the start of our anniversary celebration." Martha nodded, her mind already racing ahead to tomorrow. She had to be careful, make sure Harry didn't suspect anything. The thought made her uneasy, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the immediate task of getting through the rest of the evening. As they left the restaurant, Harry draped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You seem a little distant tonight," he said quietly. "Everything okay?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind. Work's been stressful." Harry stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Of course," Martha said quickly. "It's nothing really. Just tired, I guess." Harry searched her eyes for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if something's bothering you, I'm here." "I know," she replied, guilt twisting in her stomach. She leaned in and kissed him, hoping it would silence the nagging voice in her head. "Thank you." They walked in silence to the car, the night air cool against Martha's skin. Harry unlocked the car, and as they got in, he glanced over at her. "Tomorrow's going to be special. I can't wait." She forced a smile. "Me neither." The drive home was quiet, the tension between them subtle but present. Martha stared out the window, her mind racing. She needed to be careful, to make sure tomorrow went smoothly. But even as she planned, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that she was playing a dangerous game. When they arrived home, Harry reached for her hand again as they walked to the door. "I love you, Martha," he said softly. She froze for a moment, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "I love you too," she replied, the words coming out automatically. But as she said them, she couldn't help but wonder if they were still true. Inside, they prepared for bed, the routine so familiar it was almost comforting. But as Martha lay beside Harry, listening to his steady breathing as he drifted off to sleep, she felt a growing sense of unease. Tomorrow would be a day to remember, Harry had said. She just hoped it wouldn't be for the wrong reasons. Martha woke up to the soft light filtering through the blinds. She reached out, expecting to find Harry beside her, but her hand met only cool sheets. Sitting up, she looked around the room, the empty space next to her triggering a flicker of unease. Harry was always there in the morning, sipping coffee or reading the news. But today, the house felt strangely silent. She slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, where she found a note propped up against the coffee maker. Gone to prepare for our special day. See you at noon. It was written in Harry's usual, tidy script. She read it twice, the words not quite sinking in. Something about the note felt off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Pushing the thought aside, she pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to Curtis. Can you meet? Usual place? A reply came almost immediately. Be there in 20. Martha exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She needed this, needed him. Harry's absence was convenient, giving her the perfect window of time. She dressed quickly, choosing a simple outfit that wouldn't raise suspicion if Harry came home early. Her mind buzzed with anticipation as she drove to meet Curtis. The thrill of seeing him, of stealing these moments away from her regular life, was a high she couldn't resist. But as she neared their spot, that flicker of unease returned, nagging at her. Curtis was waiting for her at their usual bench, tucked away in a quiet corner of the park. He stood up when he saw her, but there was something different about him today. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and his usual easygoing demeanor seemed strained. Hey, Martha said, trying to shake off the feeling. She leaned in to kiss him, but he turned his head slightly, her lips brushing his cheek instead. Hey, he replied, his voice flat. She pulled back, searching his face. Everything okay? Curtis hesitated, shoving his hands into his pockets. Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is. Martha frowned, sensing there was more to it than that, but she didn't press. Instead, she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. We don't have much time, she said softly, hoping to pull him out of whatever was bothering him. He nodded, though his grip on her hand was loose, almost absent-minded. They walked together, but the usual spark between them was missing. Martha tried to engage him in conversation, but his answers were short, distracted. He kept glancing around, as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. After a while, Martha couldn't ignore the tension anymore. Curtis, what's going on? You're not yourself today. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Martha, maybe we should, cool it for a while. Her heart skipped a beat. What? Why? It's just, I've been thinking, and this is getting complicated. Complicated? Martha repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. It's been complicated from the start. Why now? Curtis looked away, his jaw tightening. I just think it's time to step back before things get out of hand. Out of hand? What are you talking about? Curtis sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I care about you, but I can't shake this feeling that something's about to go wrong. I don't know, maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I can't do this anymore. Martha stared at him, disbelief and anger battling for control. So that's it? You're just done? Curtis met her gaze, his expression pained. I'm sorry, Martha. I'm not done. I need some time to prepare. She opened her mouth to argue, to say anything that would change his mind, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt a wave of panic rising in her chest. Fine, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Curtis reached out as if to touch her, then thought better of it. Take care, okay? He said before turning and walking away, leaving her standing there stunned. Martha watched him go, a cold emptiness settling in her stomach. She stood there for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. It didn't make sense. Curtis had never been like this before, so distant, so final. The suddenness of it all felt like a punch to the gut. She forced herself to move, heading back to her car in a daze. The drive home was a blur. her mind replaying the conversation over and over. What had gone wrong? Why had Curtis suddenly pulled away? By the time she reached the house, it was nearly noon. She expected to find Harry waiting for her, maybe with that mysterious surprise he'd hinted at last night. But as she opened the door, the silence that greeted her was thick, unsettling. "Harry," she called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. There was no answer. She moved through the house, checking each room with growing urgency. The bedroom was untouched, the bed made just as she'd left it. The bathroom was empty, and so was Harry's office. A sense of dread began to coil in her chest as she realized something was very wrong. When she reached the closet, her heart stopped. Harry's clothes were gone. Every shirt, every suit, even his shoes, everything was missing. She opened drawer after drawer, but they were all empty. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, dialing Harry's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again, but the result was the same each time. Panic gripped her as she frantically searched the house once more, looking for any sign of where he might have gone. But there was nothing. No note, no clue, no trace of him at all. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Martha sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Where was Harry? And why had he left so suddenly, without a word? The more she thought about it, the more her panic grew. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Martha sat on the edge of the couch, her phone clutched in her hands, the screen glowing dimly in the fading evening light. The day had slipped away in a haze of unanswered questions and growing dread. She had called everyone she could think of, Harry's friends, his co-workers, even the few distant relatives they kept in touch with. No one had seen or heard from him. Each call that ended without answers only deepened the pit of anxiety in her stomach. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, each second stretching out painfully. She stared at the phone, willing it to ring, desperate for any news. Where could he have gone? Why hadn't he left a note? A message? Anything? She tried to convince herself that there must be a simple explanation, but the thought grew less convincing with each passing hour. Finally, as the sky outside darkened, her phone buzzed to life in her hands. Martha's heart leaped into her throat when she saw the caller ID. The police. She answered with trembling hands. "Hello, Mrs. Stevenson?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but with an edge that made Martha's heart race faster. "Yes, this is she. Have you found my husband?" she asked, her voice shaky. There was a pause on the other end, a silence so heavy it seemed to fill the room. Martha could hear the faint sounds of an office in the background. Phones ringing, muffled voices. The officer finally spoke, each word measured. "We believe we've found someone you might know. He's in critical condition at the hospital. You should come in." The words hit her like a physical blow. Martha stood up, her legs weak beneath her. Who is it?" she stammered, her mind racing. "I think it's best if you come down to the hospital, ma'am," the officer replied, evading her question. "A doctor will be there to meet you." Martha didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. Who could it be? Harry? But the officer hadn't said it was him. Her thoughts jumped to Curtis, and a cold dread settled in her chest. The drive to the hospital was a blur of headlights and dark streets. Martha's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She barely noticed the other cars on the road or the stoplight she sped through. All she could think about was what awaited her at the hospital. When she finally arrived, she parked haphazardly in the first spot she found and ran toward the entrance. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights and the sterile smell of antiseptic hit her, making the whole situation feel even more surreal. A nurse pointed her to the right direction, and soon she found herself face to face with a doctor, his expression grave. "Mrs. Stevenson?" he asked, confirming her identity. "Yes," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Is it Harry? Is my husband okay?" The doctor shook his head slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and something else, something darker. "No, it's not your husband. But it is someone you know. Mrs. Stevenson, I have to warn you. What you're about to see is difficult. You'd better not see this." Martha felt a wave of nausea rise up in her. She wanted to scream at him, to tell her who it was, to stop speaking in riddles, but she couldn't find her voice. Instead, she nodded, her legs moving almost of their own accord as she followed the doctor down the sterile hallway. They stopped outside a room, the door partially ajar. The doctor turned to her, his expression serious. "Are you sure you want to go in? It's not too late to turn back." Ignoring the warning, Martha pushed past him and entered the room. The first thing she noticed was the beeping of the machines, the steady, rhythmic sound that seemed to echo in her ears. Then her eyes fell on the figure lying in the bed, and the world tilted on its axis. It was Curtis. Martha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. His face was ashen, his eyes closed, his body covered in bandages and tubes. But it was what had been done to him that made her blood run cold. She stepped closer, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Something protruded from his abdomen, something metallic and grotesque. It looked like a piece of machinery, cruelly inserted, violating his body in a way that was almost too horrifying to comprehend. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling as she reached out, but she couldn't bring herself to touch him. The sight was too much, too surreal. How could this have happened? Who could have done this? As if in a trance, she took a step back, her mind trying to reject what her eyes were seeing. The room spun around her, the sound of the machines fading into a dull roar in her ears. "Mrs. Stevenson," the doctor's voice broke through the fog, pulling her back to the present. "I'm sorry you had to see this. We don't know who did this to him, but the police are investigating." Martha could only nod numbly, her mind struggling to make sense of the situation. This wasn't supposed to happen. Curtis was supposed to be safe, supposed to be the one thing in her life that made sense. But now he was lying here, broken, and it was all her fault. She had brought him into this. She had made him a target. The weight of guilt and fear pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. What had she done? And where was Harry? The questions swirled in her mind, but there were no answers. Only the cold, stark reality of what she had just seen. Martha staggered backward, the reality of what she was seeing slamming into her like a physical force. The room seemed to close in on her, the sterile smell of the hospital mixing with the metallic scent of blood. Martha felt her stomach churn, and she clutched at the wall for support, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. The doctor's voice broke through the haze, calm and detached in the face of such horror. "We haven't removed it yet. He's lucky to be alive." Martha tore her eyes away from Curtis's mutilated body to look at the doctor. What is it? What did they?" Her voice cracked, unable to finish the question. The doctor hesitated, glancing at the monitors before speaking. "It's a metal rod, inserted with extreme precision. We're not sure how he's even survived this long. It's a miracle, really, but the damage, it's extensive." Martha's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. A metal rod? Who could have done something so brutal, so calculated? And why? Her thoughts raced back to the moment she had received the call from the police, the officer's vague words replaying in her head. "Someone you might know. In critical condition." The pieces didn't fit. Nothing made sense. She stared at Curtis, trying to see the man she had risked everything for, but all she could see was the result of some unspeakable act of violence. The room felt too small, the air too thin. She needed to get out, to escape this nightmare. Just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed in her pocket, the sudden sound making her jump. Martha fumbled for it, her hands trembling. When she saw the name on the screen, her blood ran cold. It was Harry. She hesitated, dread pooling in her stomach. With a shaking hand, she opened the message. It was a single word: surprise. Martha stared at the screen, her mind going blank. The letters seemed to blur together, as if her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. Slowly, the meaning of the message began to sink in, and with it, a creeping sense of horror. This wasn't just a coincidence. Harry had known. He had known all along. Her hand tightened around the phone, the realization hitting her like a tidal wave. Harry, her husband, the man she had been married to for 20 years, had done this. He had known about her affair, and this was his way of telling her. The twisted, brutal way he had chosen to reveal his knowledge was almost too much to bear. She felt sick, her stomach heaving as she struggled to breathe. The walls of the room seemed to close in on her, the beeping of the machines growing louder, more insistent. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of what she had just uncovered. "Mrs. Stevenson?" The doctor's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He was watching her with concern, probably noticing the change in her expression. "Are you okay?" Martha couldn't respond. She could only shake her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She backed away from the bed, her hand gripping the phone so tightly it hurt. She needed to get out of here, to think, to figure out what to do next. I need to go," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor frowned, but didn't stop her. "If you need anything, let the nurses know." She nodded numbly and turned, practically running out of the room. The hallway stretched out before her like a tunnel, the harsh lights flickering overhead. Martha pushed through the double doors at the end, bursting into the night air. She gulped it in, trying to steady herself. But the panic inside her was growing, threatening to consume her. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Harry. "Where are you, Martha? We need to talk." Martha stared at the screen, her heart pounding in her ears. She had to get away, to think. Harry had orchestrated this, planned every detail. He was capable of anything. She couldn't go home. Not now. Not until she figured out what he wanted, what he was planning next. But where could she go? She couldn't go to the police. What would she say? That her husband had somehow done this, without any evidence to back up her claim? They would think she was crazy, or worse, that she was involved. Her mind raced, searching for answers, for a way out of this mess. She needed to find a place to hide, to regroup. Somewhere Harry wouldn't think to look. But as she stood there, under the harsh glow of the streetlights, Martha realized that there might be no place safe enough. Harry had already proven how far he was willing to go. She looked down at her phone one last time, at the messages that now felt like a death sentence. Surprise. The word echoed in her mind, a taunt, a promise of what was to come. Martha turned and started walking, her legs moving on autopilot. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stop. Not now. Not until she found a way to survive whatever was coming next. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos for Martha. Each morning, she woke with a sense of dread, the memories of the previous days haunting her every thought. She moved through her routine mechanically, the weight of recent events pressing down on her. At the police station, Martha sat in a small, sterile interview room. Officer Harris, a middle-aged man with a sympathetic expression, flipped through his notebook. "Can you walk me through what happened yesterday?" he asked, his pen poised over the paper. Martha took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Harry left a note this morning, saying he was preparing for our special day. I went to see Curtis, and when I came back, Harry was gone. Later, I got a call from the police about Curtis being in the hospital." Officer Harris nodded, jotting down notes. "Did you notice anything unusual in the days leading up to his disappearance? Any conflicts or changes in behavior?" Martha hesitated, her mind flashing back to recent interactions. Harry seemed different lately, more distant. "We argued a few times about things." The officer looked up, concern etched on his face. "Anything specific?" Martha shook her head. "Nothing I can think of that would lead to this." As the interview ended, Martha felt a mix of relief and frustration. They had nothing concrete to go on, and Harry was still missing. She left the station, the cold air biting her cheeks, and headed to the hospital for another visit. Curtis's room was quiet, the beeping of machines the only sound. The nurse gave her a nod as she entered, and Martha approached Curtis's bedside. His eyes fluttered open briefly, then closed again. "Hey," she whispered, taking his hand gently. "How are you feeling?" Curtis weakly smiled. "Better, thanks to you." Martha squeezed his hand, tears welling up. "I'm so sorry this happened." He shook his head. "It's not your fault, but you need to stay safe." Before she could respond, a nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Stevenson, the doctors need you to sign some consent forms for his treatment." Martha nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course." As she signed the forms, her mind raced. How much longer would Curtis need to recover? And what was Harry's next move? The unanswered questions gnawed at her, making sleep elusive. That night, Martha lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence of the house felt oppressive, every creak and groan amplified in the darkness. She tried to push thoughts of Harry and Curtis aside, but they kept creeping back in. A sudden noise made her sit up. The sound of the front door unlocking echoed through the house. Martha's heart raced. She grabbed her phone and dialed Harry's number, hoping he had returned. The call went to voicemail. She approached the window, peering out into the dimly lit street. A shadow moved near the driveway, and Martha's blood ran cold. She backed away, her mind racing with fear. Could Harry be back? What did he want? Determined to stay safe, Martha decided to leave the house. She grabbed her keys and headed to the front door, peering out to see if anyone was there. The street was empty, the only movement the occasional car passing by. Reluctantly, she returned to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. The next morning, Martha woke to find another note on the kitchen counter. Her hands shook as she picked it up, reading the message in Harry's neat handwriting. Gone to prepare for our special day. See you at noon. Confusion and fear swirled within her. She had seen the first note, but this was identical. Why would he leave the same message twice? Her phone buzzed with a new text from Harry. You broke your vows. Now you'll pay the price. Martha stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She felt a chill run down her spine. This was more than just a warning. It was a threat. She knew Harry was capable of anything, but this was crossing a line. Desperate for answers, Martha went back to the police. Officer Harris listened intently as she showed him the new message. We'll increase the search and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity, he assured her. In the meantime, you should consider staying somewhere safe. Martha nodded, but staying seemed impossible. Her home was all she had left. As she left the station, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Harry. Meet me where it all began. Don't try to run. Her mind raced. Where it all began? The restaurant where they had their first date? The park where she had met Curtis? She needed to think clearly. That afternoon, Martha decided to visit the restaurant, hoping to find some clue. The place was nearly empty, the manager recognizing her immediately. Mrs. Stevenson, can I help you? He asked. I received a message to meet here, she replied, showing him the text. The manager frowned. I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about that. We closed early today. Frustrated, Martha left the restaurant and headed to the park. The familiar bench where she had met Curtis was empty. She sat down, her mind racing. There had to be another way to interpret the message. As she pondered, her phone buzzed again. Harry's voice came through a new message. The truth will set you free. Don't interfere. Martha felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no longer just a threat. It was a puzzle she needed to solve. She decided to visit Curtis at the hospital, hoping he might have some answers. In Curtis's room, she found him more lucid than before. He looked tired but determined. Curtis, do you know anything about Harry's messages? She asked urgently. Curtis sighed, pulling his hand away gently. I wish I could help, Martha, but I don't know anything. Harry never mentioned anything to me. Frustration bubbled inside her. Then why did you survive the attack? Why was that device put inside you? Curtis looked pained. I've been trying to piece it together. Whoever did this wanted you to suffer, to see Curtis like this. It's all connected to your affair. Martha felt a surge of guilt and fear. What do you mean? How? Curtis shook his head. I don't know, but we need to figure it out before Harry strikes again. Determined, Martha left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She needed to protect herself and uncover the truth behind Harry's actions. As she walked through the hospital parking lot, her phone buzzed once more. Another message from Harry. Time is running out. Choose wisely. Martha clenched her fists, determination hardening her resolve. She couldn't let Harry destroy her life. She needed allies, evidence, anything that could stop him. As she drove home, she thought about her next steps, knowing that the battle was far from over. Back at home, she found the wedding ring package waiting for her. Her hands shook as she held the blood-stained ring and read the accompanying note. You broke your vows. Now you'll pay the price. Martha's mind raced. The ring was a symbol of their marriage, twisted into a weapon against her. She realized Harry was not just seeking revenge. He was trying to reclaim something he felt he had lost. She decided to visit a friend she could trust, someone who might help her navigate this nightmare. As she dialed the number, her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. This time, she chose to focus on finding a way to stop Harry before he took things even further. Martha knew that the path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but she was determined to fight for her life and uncover the truth behind Harry's vendetta. The aftermath of his actions had left her shattered, but she refused to let him win without a fight. As she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed one last time. The message was simple, yet filled with menace. See you soon. Martha took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She stepped out the door, ready to face whatever Harry had planned, knowing that her survival depended on her strength and resolve. The months following Harry's disappearance were a blend of relentless anxiety and futile attempts at normalcy for Martha. She moved to a new city, trying to leave her old life behind. She changed her name to Lisa, cut her hair short, and adopted an entirely new persona. She secured a job at a small bookstore, hoping the quiet, mundane work would soothe her frayed nerves. But no matter how much she tried to forget, the fear clung to her, always lurking just beneath the surface. Every creak in her new apartment made her jump. Every unknown number on her phone made her heart skip a beat. She told herself that Harry was gone, that he couldn't possibly find her, but the doubts gnawed at her. The only thing that gave her any solace was the thought that maybe, just maybe, Harry had moved on too. One late evening, after a long shift at the bookstore, Martha returned to her apartment. She felt an odd sense of dread as she approached the front door. The hallway was unusually quiet, the silence amplifying the sound of her own footsteps. She fumbled with her keys, her hand trembling slightly, a familiar anxiety settling in her chest. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, she immediately noticed something was off. The lights in her apartment were on. Martha distinctly remembered turning them off before she left that morning. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the small living room. Everything was in its place. Nothing appeared disturbed, but the air felt thick, almost oppressive, as if someone had been there recently. Martha's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of an intruder. She tiptoed towards the bedroom, her heart pounding in her ears. She paused at the doorway, her breath catching in her throat as she saw something lying on the bed, a familiar object that sent a chill down her spine. It was their wedding album. Her first instinct was to run, to flee the apartment and never look back. But something compelled her to move forward. With shaking hands, she reached for the album and sat on the edge of the bed. She hadn't seen it in months, hadn't even thought about it since the day she left her old life behind. Taking a deep breath, Martha opened the album. The first few pages were exactly as she remembered them. Pictures of her and Harry on their wedding day, smiling and happy. But as she flipped through the pages, the photos began to change. At first, it was subtle, a blurred figure in the background here, a shadow that shouldn't be there. But soon, the changes became more obvious, more terrifying. There were photos of her with Curtis, taken from a distance. Some were from their secret meetings in parks, others from late-night dinners in secluded restaurants. The photos were all too clear, too close, evidence that someone had been watching them, capturing every moment. Martha's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages faster now, her eyes widening in horror. The photos grew more invasive, more menacing. There was a picture of her laughing with Curtis, oblivious to the camera. Another of them kissing, completely unaware that someone had been just a few feet away. Each new photo sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through her. But it was the last photo that broke her. It was a picture of her taken just that morning as she left her apartment. She was looking straight ahead, unaware that someone had been watching her from the shadows, capturing her every move. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned the photo over. On the back, scrawled in red ink, was a single word soon. The photo slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor as Martha sat frozen, her mind racing. He had found her. Harry had found her. Despite all her efforts to disappear, to start over, He had been there all along, watching her, waiting. Her first thought was to call the police, but what could she say? That her estranged husband had left a photo album in her apartment? That she felt threatened by a single word? No, they would never believe her. This was a game to Harry, a twisted cat-and-mouse chase, and she was the prey. Panic gripped her as she realized the extent of his reach. He knew where she lived, where she worked, how she spent her days. He had been one step ahead of her this entire time. And now, he was letting her know that the game was far from over. Martha bolted from the bed, rushing to check the locks on all the doors and windows. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely dial a number. She called the only person she could think of, her friend Jean, one of the few people who knew where she had moved. "Jean," Martha gasped as soon as she heard her friend's voice. "He's found me." "What? Who?" "Martha, calm down. What's going on?" "Harry. He knows where I am. He was in my apartment. He left our wedding album, and there were pictures of me, of Curtis. He's been watching me, Jean. He's been here." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Jean spoke again, her voice was filled with concern. "Martha, listen to me. You need to get out of there. Come to my place. Right now." "I can't. What if he's out there, waiting for me?" "Don't think like that. Just get in your car and drive. I'll stay on the phone with you the whole way. You're not alone in this." Taking a deep breath, Martha grabbed her purse and keys, heading for the door. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to move. Every noise made her jump. She forced herself to keep going, to put one foot in front of the other. Her heart pounded in her chest as she made her way to the car, her eyes darting around, expecting Harry to appear at any moment. Finally, she reached the car, fumbling with the keys before starting the engine. She sped out of the parking lot, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see Harry's car following her. But the streets were empty. "Martha, are you okay?" Jean's voice crackled through the phone. "I'm on my way," Martha whispered, her voice trembling. "Good. Just keep driving. We'll figure this out together." As Martha drove through the darkened streets, her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. How had Harry found her? How long had he been watching? And most terrifying of all, what did he plan to do next? The city lights blurred as she sped towards Jean's place, her heart thudding in her chest. Martha knew one thing for certain. No matter how far she ran, she would never be free of Harry. He was always one step ahead, always in control. And now, with this latest move, he had made it clear that the game was far from over. As she pulled up to Jean's house, Martha felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe together, they could find a way to stop Harry, to end this nightmare once and for all. But as she stepped out of the car and into the safety of her friend's arms, the dread lingered, a constant reminder that Harry was still out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And when he did, Martha knew she would have to be ready.